here we go. We got a lot of crazy updates on Africa. We're doing this live, people. Russia is claiming they want to bring freedom to Africa. Freedom is always a good thing. But the way that Russia does it is not always the greatest way. And the United States is on a campaign to also debunk the fact that Russia is just full of crap. Now, if you guys are new or late to the party, Russia has been on this recent conquest to essentially pay off African debt, give free food to Africa to show that they want to stand with African nations and to bring quote-unquote freedom to Africa. Now, this man right here, many of you know him. This is Mr. Prigozhin, head of Wagner Group. Wagner is Russia. Russia is Wagner. These are the ambassadors to Russia to fulfill security contracts and to essentially be the middleman for these nations and show, look how powerful Russia is. We have these mercenary groups doing the work that you ask for. Now, there is nothing wrong with freeing Africa, but there is something wrong with the tactics that Wagner uses, and we'll get into all of that. It's one thing to do your job and to eliminate enemy targets, but it's another thing to take out the public's water supply, destroy bridges, destroy villages, and say, look, we're safe now, everybody. And so let's go ahead and see what Mr. Prigozhin said. This is his first public video since doing the whole mutiny in Russia and moving up to Belarus, and he announced, look, we are going to now focus on Africa. Some people didn't necessarily know what was going to happen to Wagner, but Wagner is here. He's in Africa. Here's the clip.
Работаем. Температура плюс 50.
Okay, here we go. This is the classic Prigozhin. He's a really good public spokesman to make it seem like life is so tough and look at us. We're working. We are working. The temperature is 50 plus. Everything as we like.
Как мы любим. ЧВК Wagner проводит РПД.
Wagner PMC conducts reconnaissance and search actions. These are all buzzwords to make things sound way more professional than they are, like every military ever does reconnaissance.
Делает Россию еще более великой на всех континентах.
This right here is the most important thing, and this is where a lot of people are calling the bluff on the Russians. Russia even greater on all continents. Let's go ahead and rewatch this part here. Wagner PMC conducts reconnaissance and search actions. Makes Russia even greater on all continents and Africa more free. So again, we're probably going to see more and more of this campaign to make Africa free. Now again, don't get me wrong. Every country, in my opinion, should be free. And we will get to how Wagner, their definition of how to get to freedom and what they mean by free.
Россию еще более великой на всех континентах, а Африку еще более свободной. Справедливость и счастье для африканских народов. Кошмарим ИГИЛ Аль-Каида.
This right here is another key point. Again, this is the common enemy, these militant groups right here. I can't say the names because, you know, YouTube gets all crazy. But this is the common enemy that, again, Wagner Group is fighting these organizations, but they're also fighting them in Syria, and so is the U.S. military, and the U.S. military is fighting these organizations in Africa as well. So you have this weird dichotomy of Wagner's fighting these militant groups, the United States is fighting these militant groups, but Wagner does it better.
И других бандосов. Берем на работу настоящих богатырей и продолжаем выполнение задач, которые были поставлены. We
made promises we would succeed. Now, again, one thing to understand is that Wagner is pretty much fully in Mali to take care of the security within Mali, and they push a lot of those militant groups on the border of Niger. Then you have action happening in Niger with the militant groups listed, and then Niger sits there, well, our president doesn't know what he's doing. We need a coup. We need better security forces. So another thing I want to show you guys to paint the total picture, because a lot of things are left without context, is that you have to understand Putin essentially, he is saying he loves Africa. He wants to work with Africa. Now, is he trying to form a Soviet Union in Africa? We don't necessarily know that, but we do know that Putin and other leaders, like in Burkina Faso, they called each other brothers. That Africa and the Soviet Union have had the downfalls, and they're united, and how they've had another come up. But right here, this is July 28th at the time of making this video, 2023. This is the African summit held in St. Petersburg, and you can sort of see the tonality of how President Putin paid off the debts of African countries and supplied African countries with grain to show how much food and money Russia has and how much we support Africa.
Well, speaking of expanding influence, Russian President Vladimir Putin has told leaders from African states meeting in St. Petersburg that Moscow is forgiving $23 billion of debt owed by them. Putin is also promising to maintain grain supplies to the continent and to increase Russia's diplomatic presence there. He's blaming the West for high food prices and inflation after printing money.
Somebody's mad. B. Lewis, I know you're trolling. Somebody's mad I don't have an American bias. Sorry for reporting the story. Not to cut this off.
During the pandemic, Putin says the global economic system is going through significant change.
Here we go. Here's Putin showing how much he loves Africa. You know, it's a very interesting take because Putin even admitted that the Soviet Union never really worked with Africa. Now this is our time to work together. But you have to understand, again, the way that Wagner was operating in Mali, in Central Africa as well, is that, again, they will literally do whatever it takes to quote-unquote secure an area. If we have to take out a well, if we have to take out an entire village, we secured the area.
The African continent is indeed becoming a new center of power. Its political and economic role is growing exponentially. Everyone will have to take this reality into account. For example, let's look at the initiative by a number of African states on solving the Ukraine crisis, which is an acute problem. We are not...
Again, Russia always tying this to Ukraine, how African nations are working with Russia to help solve, as he calls it, the Ukraine crisis. Now, to give you guys a little more context, because this did happen a month ago, at this time, this is when Russia ended the whole grain deal and was going after Ukraine and still going after Ukraine and destroying silos, etc. Anything that had to do with grain, wheat exports. Putin was trying to show, look, we are so powerful. We're going to get, we've never had so much grain in our lives. We're going to give you this free grain, people. Okay, so just wanted to show you guys that. Now, again, you know who else showed up to this African summit was Mr. Prigozhin right here, the head of Wagner. This was a little complicated considering everyone was like, what is going on? Wagner and head of Wagner was out to take over Moscow, was out to take over the government. Not so much. So now when you have the head of Wagner out here saying we're going to be focusing on Africa, you have Putin out here saying we're going to be focusing on Africa. They're telling us they're focusing on Africa. This is not like breaking news, people, okay? The breaking news is we don't know what move Russia or Wagner's trying to make, as Niger is currently falling apart and they're not willing to stand down. They're saying we want a 3-year transition plan. ECOWAS is saying, no, why would it take you 3 years to reinstate a president? What is going on? And so now when you have Niger and Wagner and Russia waiting in the shadows, who knows what's going to happen? Let's see what else I got here for y'all. Something else to consider, U.S. sanctions on Mali. Mali does work close with Wagner. In fact, Mali kicked out Mali Africa. They kicked out the French. They brought in the Russians. Mali has not... they're not trying to hide anything. They love Russia. They love Wagner, and that's their prerogative. As far as what the United States does to counteract this, guys, they just cut ties and they don't send you money. That's what the United States usually does. We don't give you money. Now, it's a little complicated because, again, they are fighting a common enemy, and this could be an issue because if Mali and Wagner has information on, hey, look, in this specific region, we have militant groups. Maybe you guys should target them. It starts to become a problem for a lot of people in the region. The civilians of these countries are the ones truly struggling when the common enemy is supposed to be these militant groups, which is the perfect segue to sort of show an American general reveals the new U.S. policy to counter Russian influence in Africa. And what you'll find interesting is that Russia and the United States are both using the same tactic of we are attacking these militant groups to make you safe. Now the question is, who does it better, Wagner or the United States? When I say the United States, it really is U.S. Special Forces. And if you're watching this live, thank you everyone for being here. AFRICOM, who is in charge of the African regions for combat operation, AFRICOM talks about its goal of ensuring stability and fighting terrorism. But behind the scenes, it's consolidating the U.S. political and military position on the continent, balancing and even encircling other world powers, Russia. Washington has paid more attention to Africa, and among the most important African countries, that include the U.S. presence on its soil, all these countries right here, okay? Which is exactly where Russia is focusing. The Russian Defense Ministry new strategy revealed an attempt to expand its presence by replacing, this right here is key. This is what Russia's doing. The Russian Defense Ministry's new strategy revealed an attempt to expand its presence by replacing private military companies already in Africa. African countries just have a ton of contractors out there throughout the world. Not only Russian contractors, but also U.S. contractors, etc. The Russian private military company is present in Mali and several other African countries with a mission to train army personnel and help African countries strengthen security on their lands. And the serious work carried out by this company has led other African governments to sign defense contracts in order to protect their countries from any security threat. So again, this is what Wagner is doing. We are out here to show you guys how free we can make you. We're going to secure you so good. But the issue is, and why ECOWAS has an issue, is that this security is pushing all of the militant groups out of Mali into the other neighboring ECOWAS countries. So don't get that twisted. I'm not here to say Wagner's doing an amazing job. They're great. The way that they do it screws everyone else over instead of working together. Because now, if Niger says, well, look what's happening to Mali, it's working out for Mali, hey, come work with us. Now you got to kick out the United States. Now you got to kick out other elements. And that's one more country down in ECOWAS, just country by country by country. It's like a domino effect. Now, I do like this graph. This right here was on the Wagner recruitment website. This gives you rough numbers or an estimate. Let me close this a little bit more for you guys. This gives you a rough estimate of the influence of Wagner in Africa. 3,000 in Mali. Again, these are rough estimates. 3,000 Sudan, 1,000 Congo. I don't think many people realize Wagner's also in Venezuela, 2,000. So they're in Africa, guys. This is not like a new thing. Many people, when Wagner really was becoming popular, it was more so in Syria, and the U.S. Special Forces and Wagner actually had a showdown. I suggest you go look that up. But yeah, Russia's in Africa. Like, they're fighting in Ukraine, and they're struggling. They're not doing great in Ukraine, but they're not doing bad in Africa. Don't get that twisted. They are making a lot of progression in Africa. So, that's essentially what's going on, everybody. Mr. Prigozhin wants to bring freedom to Africa. U.S. Special Forces, United States, they say, bullcrap. If you want to bring freedom, let's work together. Let's work with ECOWAS. Why are you sucking $200 million from Mali if you're here for freedom? You're here for money. You're here for resources. No one's falling for it. Anyway, if you are watching this live, thank you so much for being here. I will keep you all updated. And again, if you are watching this live, I'm going to post this video. Please comment on the posted video. Like the video. It helps out a lot, and it's free. I love all you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope you guys learned something. Thank you again. Love you all.